Hey everybody, my name is Taylor Gibson, and this is the Gr8Wyte Experience. Hi everybody, welcome to the Gr8Wyte Experience, the show where I talk about anything and everything of interest. My name is Taylor Gibson. Thank you for listening. I hope everybody out there has had a great and safe holidays. I'm really excited to be able to get together to record a brand new episode for you today as we close out 2021 here in just a couple of days. Today's episode is one that will be a great way to end this year as we get to look back on an album and a band that has been very close to my heart as long as I can remember. And the person sitting next to me is joining me once again for the show. And, you know, when he proposed this episode to me, I says, absolutely, I'll do it. But he has to come on, my dad. Kenny, Top, welcome back to the show, man. How you doing?
Son, thanks. This is the second show. I feel very privileged to look at this Tool review. So yeah, thank you, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to all your listeners out there, son.
Yeah, we're super excited to have you on. And of course, like last time I had you on, we were talking about Nirvana's Nevermind, an album that you and I were very divided on, and we gave our reasons why. But when this album was proposed, I felt this is great because this is an album that you and I both very near and dear to our hearts. And the album we're going to be looking at today is 2001's Lateralus by Tool, a career-defining album that cemented Tool's signature sound. It is often widely regarded to be their best album alongside of Anima. Now, looking back on the record, the critical reception was met fairly positive at the time, except for one publication. Now, I don't know if you have any idea who Pitchfork is.
Yes.
So Pitchfork, for those who don't know, they're an independent music website, very big in looking at independent music, and they've been very, very critical of punk rock and metal. This album, this is one that I'm just like, I can't take these guys seriously, because there's a guy on YouTube called Crash Thompson, and he did a whole retrospective on Tool, and he also did top 10 reviews that Pitchfork got wrong, and this was number one.
Right.
Lateralus, 1.9 out of 10.
No, you're right. Pitchfork are most certainly not advocates of music. They seem to be kind of I don't know. It's an opinion.
Yep.
It's not an objective review like, where people would, everyone has agreements, disagreements, but Pitchfork, yeah, they're most certainly, it almost seems like they're trying to go left wing on the whole thing.
Yeah. They have a real, back in the day with record stores, they have that really snobby sort of record store clerk vibe to them.
Yeah, and it's clear, and I think most people pick up on that right away. I mean, when you start trashing Nirvana, and even bands like Nirvana that I'm not a huge fan of, but like we discussed in your podcast,
yep.
What they brought to the table in supporting the youth movement and such, when you start trashing that, you know what? Shame on you.
I get it. Look, and I get it if that's not your taste in music,
right.
But you have to be objective about it. And I mean,
do.
you go back and look at some of the reviews they did for, say, Andrew WK, the Mars Volta, Tool.
Right.
And you're just like, okay, I get that this isn't your taste or genre of music, but you can't just say, no, this is all crap.
No, you're right. You have to be objective. You have to be open-minded. I mean, I'm sure the DJs and VJs and people that play music or play videos may not like Madonna or something, but if it was popular, that's what it's about, hence pop music, right? So whatever seems to be popular and makes money at the time, yeah, for sure. But there's something out there for everyone, including people that are fans of Justin Bieber, Metallica, whatever your genre taste is, like you say. We don't need Pitchfork or Knife and Fork or whoever it is to try to sway or persuade us to think outside of what we already kind of thought of the genre or thought of the band or thought of the album or thought of the song or whatever. So
100%.
Yeah.
And, despite the fact that Pitchfork may have railroaded the album Lateralus was very successful. It went on to sell 2 million records in the United States. It won a Grammy for Best Metal Performance in 2002 for Schism, and it is ranked at 123rd on the Definitive 200 list by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
And once again, Lateralus, in keeping in good Tool fashion, also the videos.
Mm-hmm.
People came to expect the videos, and they got it. So Tool is a band that delivers.
100%. Now, speaking of the album itself, Dad, I want to get your thoughts on it, first of all. Like, when you look back at the album Lateralus, like, what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind when you hear the album?
First thing that comes to my mind before I hear the music is the artwork.
Yep.
Okay, draws me in. All the video side of the Tool album itself before I hear the actual music, because the videos don't really lend themselves to the actual song. It's just something that's played. There's no connection between the video and the song. So that was my first thing about the album itself. The second thing I thought about with the album, and I know you have 9 different songs we're going to review here on this, is the diversity in the arrangement, as well as some other progressive bands such as like Rush, King Crimson, bands that you've come to expect. They're not just going to sit on a merry-go-round and the same thing is just a regurgitated tune from the last album.
Yeah, they're not just going to put out the same album.
That's it. That's absolutely right. And it feels like another extension of the last where they left off.
Yep.
So
absolutely. And even for myself, like looking back at Lateralus, I've had this weird thing with the album itself, because when I look at both Lateralus and Anima, I like them for different reasons. I think as a standalone start to finish album, I think Anima is actually better. I think Anima start to finish is a better album, but I think track by track, if you're going for individual tracks, it's got to be Lateralus. And you put it best, like when you talk about the arrangements of the songs, definitely lends itself to a lot of the progressive bands that were putting out at the time.
Right.
And I know that King Crimson was a big influence on Tool, and we'll talk about later when we talk about their producer, because he produced, I think he did one of the later King Crimson albums, but he did work with like Robert Fripp. But I think for myself, Lateralus is an album where I honestly think that, and I know that you and I have talked about this in the past, is that I think of Tool in the way that people think of Rush. And I think Rush is a pretty good comparison, because the people that like Tool love Tool, the people who love Tool are obsessed about them, and the people who don't like Tool can't understand the first two group of people.
They don't get it, yeah, just like Rush. People say, I don't get Rush. Why are they the most popular Canadian band? Well, because they're more popular worldwide.
Yep.
If you're talking about Canadian bands, it's either Celine Dion, Bryan Adams, The Tragically Hip, all these bands that are popular. But Rush have been around since before I went into high school. So when you discuss Lateralus, I totally agree with you, yes. However, my allegiance is towards Lateralus, because the song Lateralus itself is like something that could have been taken off of Abbey Road. It's almost like 7 different songs in one.
Mm-hmm.
It's Mean Mr. Mustard, and it's all these other things in the Abbey Road music on the second side of Abbey Road that almost make up a song out of 7. It's like an album all onto its own, or an EP onto its own.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, and definitely when you look at the album Lateralus, I think it's an album that I'm trying to think of the words here. You think doing a podcast, you think I'd be good at words here, but just the overall composition of the music is definitely very complicated than it was on Anima, and I think that's just a natural progression, because on Anima you definitely saw a band that, again, going back to Rush, like if you listen to Opiate and Undertow, you could definitely tell Tool was definitely a band that were kind of doing what the bands of that era were doing, but they're still kind of their own thing. And as they progressed, like Rush, Tool became their own thing. With Anima, they were still kind of that, but they still incorporated more of their progressive stuff. And then Anima, they cemented what they were going forward.
Yeah, like you say, alluding to Rush, 2112, or Fly By Night. These are rock albums, right? Undertow, Opiate, they were rock albums. After Undertow, they expanded, right? they were given the musical freedom to expand and explore their own skill sets, to bring their touch to the music. I mean, the last track that we're going to look at here, Triad, it's a very tribal song. So you would think, oh, well, that means drumming. Not necessarily.
No, it's
because
rhythm.
we will get back into some of the music where Justin takes care of a lot of the dynamics. Danny Carey, the drummer, will carry the dynamics into the next progression part of the song.
Mm-hmm.
Where Maynard fits in or fills in or whatever he does, he normally has a really good sense of where he should come in.
Yep.
And it almost seems like they all work off each other where they fit in on that song. A build in the build.
Yep.
Not in the final production, because they know where it's going to end up, because they have a lot of really quiet songs, such as
The Patient.
I was going to say Reflection, but it gets really hard rock at the end, and then boom, it stops.
Yeah.
So it's the final part of the song, but they just seem to segue off each other into the next progression part of the song. So that's really neat.
100%. So I'm going to move away from talking about Lateralus and just talk about the band itself, because this is a band that, again, you and I have been very much into their music for a long time.
From the beginning, yeah.
From the very beginning. And I
Yeah.
want to ask, like, how did you first get into Tool? I know that you and I have talked about this in the past, but how exactly did you discover the band Tool?
It was a guy that I worked with. He says, "Have you ever listened to Tool?" I said, "No." And this is back when it was actually when I first heard the 10 album by Pearl Jam. You know, I was getting into STP, getting into Alice in Chains and all that stuff. And he goes, "Check out this band. It's not, they're not from Seattle. It's Tool." So he gave me this is on cassette too. So that's how far back it goes. And so he said, "Listen to this. Listen to Sober." That was the first one I listened to, and it was only 20 seconds into the song. I go, "Wow, this is cool. This is really cool." And as a Tool fan, Tool listener, I don't read into the lyrics like a lot of people try to make something out of the lyrics. I just think that's Maynard's expression and his form of expression to leave his trademark on the song. So I don't use the lyrical content for me to go, "God, I really like that Tool song, Prison Sex" or whatever. But what I did do is really liked Undertow because of Sylvia Massey. Huge fan of Sylvia Massey's. Even today I am. So, and she, like all good engineers, were part of the producing component to, and saying, "Why don't you try this? Why don't you do that?" And I know they had fun doing some things, and they incorporated some of it. And they had Henry Rollins, as you know, was on it. Henry Rollins appeared on it.
Yep.
And he didn't have to, but it fit really well. And she brought these elements in. And, you know, just like George Martin for the Beatles, you have to be part of the creative process, right?
Or even going back to our last album that we had you on, we're Butch Vig with Nirvana.
Yeah. Even, what's her name, Manson there from...
Shirley Manson.
Shirley Manson. Yeah, Butch Vig was very instrumental in getting her to come back and retry again for their band, because they really wanted her in, because he had a vision.
Yep.
Right? Sylvia Massey had a vision for... Tool had a vision for what they wanted to put out. And I think sometimes that vision from all artists can be stifled by somebody else's opinion, not vision. So she had the same kind of vision as they had. So I think it aligned itself really, really well.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, even talking about Undertow itself, again, going back to our last album,
Yes.
talking about Nirvana's Nevermind, Undertow also recorded at Sound City.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Which hence gave you some of the tonal components of...
Well, the drum sound, number one.
The drum sound, right?
Yep.
So that's a bonus in itself, especially when you have a fusion drummer like Danny Carey, and especially when he plays light, and then it gets heavier and heavier, and the drumming doesn't speed up, but just the attack on hitting the drums increases, which gives you a different textural
feel, for
yeah,
sure.
Textural feel, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, obviously, Tool did Undertow at Sound City.
Yes, they did.
Following the wave of Nirvana, which included Rage Against the Machine, which Maynard also appeared on one of their songs.
Oh, right, yeah.
So, talking about Tool,
Mm-hmm.
and again, this is a band that's been very near to my heart my entire life, because I remember even back in the day, going back to you had Undertow on cassette, because when I was a little kid, I remember you listening to the album, and you introduced Kevin and Sean to it as myself, and it's been an album that just, the band itself has been one of those that even growing up, I was really interested in bands that were kind of not weird, but kind of different, and they kind of had their own thing to them, and Tool was definitely that. Tool was definitely one that they were not mainstream, they were doing their own thing, and it was really cool.
And you could tell because when Tool were on the road, they would pick up bands that were different, so they could showcase them as well. It would be the Mars Volta or somebody like that, something totally different from what their music was.
Mm-hmm. Or even on their current tour, Fear on Column, where they had, I don't know if you know who Brass Against is.
Oh yes,
yeah. So they have Brass Against touring with them right now.
Yeah,
and they did fantastic Tool covers. I gotta shout out to them on that.
Yeah, total shout out. And you were mentioning Kevin and Sean there earlier. So I remember Sean was one of these people that was a fan of Tool, such as you and I and Kevin. But he'd be a fan of the different songs, the ones like Parabola, Reflection, No Quarter, the cover No Quarter. He would lean more to that, and I'm like, okay, well that's weird.
More the deeper cuts.
Yeah, just exactly. More the deeper cuts, and for some unknown reason, he liked that. But those types of fans see Tool in that light, whereas you and I see Tool, not commercially, but something that would be...
They could see it in one way. The hardcore fans would see their deeper cuts and look at them in a different way.
Right. And when you go to one of their shows may not actually have the pot. They might not have Undertow or Sober, or they might be doing odd tunes.
Yep.
And people are going, what the hell is this? I've never heard this before. Well, you have the album. You better go back and listen to it.
Yeah.
Because it's a cut off that album. You go, oh, really? So if people don't like the beginning of a song, they'll just skip on to the next one, right?
Yep.
And they'll forget all about the one that they just skipped.
And I remember even back in the day of the days of buying CDs, I remember you bought a CD, you put it in, play it for 30 seconds, you didn't like it, you change it.
Yeah, of course. And you're just going, okay, I just spent extravagant amount of money on a CD that has one good song.
Yeah.
You weren't buying Live at Leeds. You weren't buying Quadrophenia. You weren't buying any Led Zeppelin stuff, right?
No.
You were buying something that was new, and you go, okay, one good tune and the rest is filler. Okay, well, it's filler to you, it's filler to me, but perhaps not to Sean or somebody that would look at it from a different perspective, right? So
absolutely. And even, again, talking about CDs, like even back in the day of CD burning and all that stuff, like I had so many mixed CDs, like big binders that were this thick.
Yeah,
so many Tool songs were on those. I introduced a number of my friends to them, but the one thing I always found really interesting was, like, even in high school, where I hung out with the crowd that was definitely metalheads for sure, and it was really weird to see, because Tool is such a respected band in the world of hard rock and metal, and yet here's these metalheads are just going, yeah, Tool, who cares?
You're right. Especially the people that listen to black Swedish metal and things like that, where they thumb their nose at people that use triggers for drums like Danny uses.
Yeah.
You and I both know we play music, we both record music, and we know it's what comes out of the speakers at the end of the day that matters to the average listener. People aren't going to go, oh man, that just sounds like a bunch of shite because it's a trigger. Well, a tube screamer is a trigger.
Yeah.
And I use it on every Marshall I've ever owned, and you use one.
But then again, the average music fan is not thinking of that. They think of it in the way of how it's presented, the sound of itself. Like, I think of even look at industrial rock.
Yeah.
A lot of Nine Inch Nails stuff is all samples, triggers, stuff like that, but they do it in a way that sounds not palatable, but it sounds musical.
Yeah, that's why you can afford to have just two people on stage and a couple of keyboard things, whether it's Daft Punk or Ministry, where they will blend a trigger with two live drummers, not just one. So they'll have two live drummers playing simultaneously. And the best part about that is Gary Glitter, I hate to use that name, he had two drummers. Dave Clark 5 back in the 60s had two drummers. And if they were slightly out, it just made it sound thicker.
Yep.
So it's no more than double tracking, something that John Lennon actually started. Everyone goes boo to that. They thumb their nose. But he did. He started double tracking, triple tracking. So the whole thing about using triggers, as you know and I know and most people know, it sounds too machine-like. Well, like, once again, the average person that is driving their Honda or Toyota, whatever they drive, whatever comes out of their car speakers, they don't sit there and tell their girlfriend, oh, Taylor Gibson, he used samples on that, and that sounds like dog shit. Well, no. And meanwhile, she loves it.
Yep.
Just enjoy the music. Don't analyze it.
Yeah, because there's a tip, and even think about Lateralus as an album, it gets so weird looking at it from a critical standpoint than just being a fan.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're looking at it from a critical point of view, you look at how does this work? Why doesn't this work? How does this work with this, that, next thing, right? And you're looking at it from that way where, as if I'm just sitting in my car listening to, say, Parabola or Schism, I'd be like, oh, okay, that's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, like most bands that record, one of the things they have to take into consideration is they have to play it live if they want to sell the album. So people don't want to hear the album. They have it at home already. They want to hear another performance. So it's not going to be perfect, but what they're going to do is they're going to hear different versions of a song, be it faster or slower or more things, like you say, samples involved in it. And I think Stinkfist is one of those songs that has many permutations to it. Mm-hmm. So people don't know what to expect.
Yep.
The Tea Party, the Canadian band The Tea Party, whenever they do the River, in the lead guitar part, they always have either Undertow by Tool or something by Led Zeppelin. So people, or Paint It Black.
Or what was it when we saw them live? It was Heroes by David Bowie.
Yeah, and man, did that fit? Had nothing to do.
And
with
also
the song.
with or without you by U2. A song you would not think that would fit with that.
But the two of those things blended, and that was on the anniversary, I believe, of David Bowie passing. So it was quite fitting. But I'm just alluding to how, when it comes to doing an album, and the bands are going to go, how are we going to do that live when we have 64 tracks of just Pro Tools samples? Well, guess what? Take the samples and your Pro Tools rig and play along to it.
Yep.
It's not like one of those crappy Saturday Night Live things where the performance is pre-recorded, pardon me. That's not, that's not the case. So enjoy the performance when you get to see the band live, and then go home and listen to the album again, because you just got your money's worth from the show. And these bands put a lot of time into rehearsing a live performance, which people don't realize.
Yeah. I mean, but then again, you've got bands like, even alluding to Led Zeppelin, where they had their songs, people knew the songs, but they would kind of change it up or they do something different just to keep it fresh for them. Absolutely.
And that's one of the things, to keep it interesting for the audience, it has to be interesting for the people that recorded it in the first place. So you can tell that people don't want to be on stage. They're just trying to get through the show to get off stage. And there's those bands that want to be on stage, that are having fun. And although Tool looked like a very serious group on stage, how they react after the concert to the fans and respond to the fans speaks volume, because they take the time to address the left stage, center stage, the right stage, the band members themselves, and they're thanking the fans for being part of their experience of writing the music for them.
Yeah. And I know, even talking about Tool, and we can actually allude to our next thing, and we're going to talk about, and one of the things that, for a lot of people, and I love talking about, was seeing bands live. And you and I have seen countless concerts over the years.
Sure have.
Tool was definitely that one concert for years and years and years. We talked about, oh, wouldn't that be so cool to see them? August of 2006, they finally come to Vancouver.
Yeah.
We're there. And I don't know where you would rank it in your top concerts ever seen. I would say it's got to be in my top 3 for sure. First time seeing Tool.
Yeah, and I've seen some really, really good bands even before you were around, son. So I have to say that's the best Tool concert I've seen, because we saw the 10,000 Days.
Yeah, saw them twice.
So, which I enjoyed. But I guess for the first experience of seeing them in Vancouver, I'm going to I'm going to give Tool number 1 spot. And the number 2 spot for me, actually, believe it or not, goes to the Tea Party. First time we saw the Tea Party. That is a band that plays for the audience, the Tea Party.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not trying to get off the Tool subject, but we were just talking about where we're ranking things. So I don't think anybody would ever be disappointed in seeing a Tool show, whether you're a fan or not. I think you would probably appreciate just the whole experience of Tool, the audio, the visual thing, like the Carnival of Sins Motley Crue show.
Yep.
Okay, I confess that's my top one.
Carnival of Sins. I gotta say, just for a standalone
that was the
live
best.
show.
That was the best. Yeah.
Carnival of Sins was really, really good. I think Motley Crue, because we saw them 3 times live.
Yeah.
Each time we saw them, their performance got better, but their stage show got stripped back.
That's right, but the music was what was showcased, not the Kiss approach to music where it's explosions and drum risers lifting and smoke and blood being spewed.
Yeah, but Kiss is such a different band because, again,
of course,
they're a band who, it's all about performance, not music.
Yes, of course. And the music speaks for itself, and so does the performance, but they're 2 distinctly different things. So when it comes to Tool, Tool don't run around on stage like System of a Down or one of these bands. But once again, they're focused on the music, and it comes across really good.
It does.
It really, really is articulated for live performance. Because anyone that's ever played in a band, including myself, knows that playing live, something is about to happen bad. It's inevitable. Something is going to drop out. Drum microphones or vocal microphones or a Marshall.
You're gonna have something goes wrong.
Yeah, and when you have a good band like Tool that can cover you till you get your little thing fixed up, that's the difference between a good band and just a mediocre band.
Yeah, and it's funny because we saw Tool in 2006.
Yeah.
16 months later, we saw them again, and it's weird because of all places, they came to Vancouver Island.
They did. They came to Victoria.
That is still one of those things that I just like. Wow, I still cannot believe after all these years. That it's been almost 15 years after this has happened. It's one of those things where, because again, Tool is one of those bands you just never ever think they're going to come to Victoria.
Yeah, well, they played in Kamloops too. They played different venues like that where I'm sure a lot of people in Kamloops go, wow, really?
Really, they're coming here?
Yeah, but anyway.
Yeah, but I think the opening of the arena here in Victoria has really, really done a lot of good things for the city of Victoria, because now you have a performance venue where you can now bring bands. And look at all the bands they've brought over the years, from ZZ Top to Rod Stewart to Weird Al to Tool to Slayer,
and even Cesar Millan when he was here doing the Dog Whisper thing.
Yep, it's
not just about rock music; it's about a venue for people to come together. And whether or not USS, they were here, and we were talking about things that go wrong live on stage. Well, the backup or the warm up, whatever you call the band, the support band, they had a lot of problems. And the USS guys came out and gave them a hand, and they hadn't even come on stage yet.
Yeah, but what about when we saw Metric?
Same thing.
And the opening band...
Oh, Stars.
Stars was not bad. Stars was not a bad band. The lead singer... I don't think I've ever told the story. So when we saw Metric in 2012, Stars was this band that opened up for them, and their lead singer was so hammered. Like, he's cursing every third or fourth word. So he's leaning forward, and he face planted into the stage monitors. And you and I were sitting there and we're like, did that just happen?
Yeah. Okay. So just so your listeners know, there's actually a female and a male front vocalist, or upfront vocalist, or lead vocalist, however you want to perceive it. And he looked like he was 10 sheets to the wind.
Easy.
And when he face planted into the monitors, I wasn't sure if he tripped or what he was doing, but he just went out of sight. He went into the dark.
Yep.
So the woman there is left to sing, but the two of them sing off each other, so she was left singing by herself. So there was a big dropout. It's quite funny. So.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
Now, just moving away here from talking about Metric, and we got to go back to talking about Tool, because I think that one thing that really needs to be brought up here when talking about the album Lateralus is the 4-year period between the Anima tour ending and Lateralus being released, because there was a lot of stuff that really happened in Tool's timeline. And we'll start off where, again, going back to what we did about our last episode, where you got to understand by the time 1996, 1997 rolled around, it was very clear that the bands that started coming out in the early 1990s, like the Nirvanas and Stone Temple Pilots, would not see what 2000 was going to be, because, again, by that time, bands were either breaking up, going on hiatus, or their music qualities just dropped. And then for a while there, it looked like Tool was going to face that same fate because of what was going on with their record label. They had gotten a big lawsuit about that.
Right, yeah.
Personality clashes. There was just all kinds of stuff that almost tore Tool apart. And honestly, I think the world of music would be a little less if Tool had broken up during that time.
Yeah. No, like you were saying about, what was the label?
Zoo Records.
Zoo Records. I think the band themselves, I think through the evolution of the legal problems that Tool had, and the personality problems, so every band goes through it at some point. Whether you're the Beatles or whoever. Like you say, though, I think just that it could have been the demise of the band.
Yep.
It could have been, but they collectively chose to not let that be the end of Tool.
Mm-hmm.
And just so your listeners understand something, Tool is not just a popular band in America.
Yep.
They're very, very popular worldwide, right? They are. So, like you say, it would be devastating for all the listeners worldwide on a quote unquote global level. So, when it comes to when you can't reconcile, you move along. It's a marriage, and then you get divorced, right? So the whole thing is about being behind the 8 ball with Zoo Records, and things like that. It's a whole new process. You got to get new producers, new people involved. You need the right people, because you've got to do a good album to start paying off some of these legal bills that can be very costly, even years after.
It is true. And I think the thing with Zoo Records really was that, and I think I might be wrong when I say this, I think what was going on with them was that Zoo Records was going either bankrupt or out of business.
Yeah.
Somebody picked it up, and the record label didn't pick up Tool's options. So Tool thought they were free agents, so they started shopping around for a new label. The record label found out, sued Tool, Tool countersued. It was just a big, ugly legal battle. And But not only that, when it comes to personality clashes, I think that really, one of the things, I remember reading this somewhere, I think that what really caused a stink within the Tool group was Maynard going off and doing a Perfect Circle.
Right. Now, was that because they had a prearranged agreement, or was it?
I think it's just because, like, they were fighting with the label, and they were trying to start this new album, and then Maynard just goes, you know what? Screw it. Yeah. I'm going to do this thing. I'll come back. It's kind of like, going back to us about the 90s bands, the band The Foo Fighters. They kind of went the same thing in the 2000s, where the band was fighting within, where Dave Grohl and Taylor Hawkins, all these guys were fighting, and Dave's like, you know what? I don't need to do this. We spent $1 million doing this record. Doesn't work. I'm going to go do Queens of the Stone Age for a bit. Right.
That helps him clear his mind. It gives Taylor Hawkins a chance to give him a bit of a timeout, right?
Yep.
So when you're talking about Maynard and such, alluding to him stepping out, doing Perfect Circle, when you're in a legal battle, you're in a legal battle as a group, not as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
The Beatles were a group when they were going through legal things in the background, but it would appear that they were at loggerheads with each other. Well, it's as they always say, musical differences. So, but I think perhaps that's why the rest of the Tool band itself said, "Hey, listen, Maynard, get back here, man. There's 4 of us in this band. We've got to fight these guys. We're balls deep into this. We have to countersue because we're being sued. If you don't countersue, you're just going to lose. So, but anyway, it was really good to see that Tool is a band that stands the test of time.
Yep.
and they don't follow somebody else. They are leaders. They are not followers.
No, absolutely, and especially because at the time in the late 1990s, it's really interesting to see where rock really was at the time. Because again, like the bands of the early 90s were not around anymore. These new bands that were being influenced by the Nirvanas and Tools, whatever, started coming up. Where you had, say, a Korn, a Limp Bizkit, a Deftones, even that were started coming out, becoming really popular. And Tool, of course, was very against rap rock, new metal. They said, oh yeah, it's just a bunch of posers and frat boys crap and whatever. But one of the things I always found really interesting was Deftones put out an album called White Pony in 2000.
Right, yeah.
And there's a song on it called The Passenger where Maynard is on it.
Yeah. So it's almost like, is this not the same bunch that you were chucking crap at? And now you're joining forces with them, right?
Yeah, it's kind of weird, but I think Deftones kind of has a bit of that Tool thing to them as well, where especially if you listen to Adrenaline or Around the Fur, the first couple of records, where you can definitely see that they kind of sound like what these bands are doing, but they're kind of their own thing. And then by White Pony, it's very much as, okay, this is what the Deftones is. And Deftones has changed their sound a few times over the years. And, well, I can't say I'm a huge Deftones fan. I definitely like and respect what they've done.
Sure.
Yeah. But Maynard definitely has, I think he has a very big appreciation for what the Deftones are doing.
Yes, but he also has a huge influence on other bands, right?
Yeah.
Maynard, not necessarily Tool, not necessarily Adam Jones or Danny Carey or Justin, but Maynard himself, I think, influences others that gives them confidence to carry on doing what other people said, no, you shouldn't. You remember back in the day when Run DMC did Walk This Way with Aerosmith?
Yep.
When I was a kid, Aerosmith were like, they were all the
rage.
Yeah. And then
But by the mid 80s it was kind of like, oh yeah, this is just dinosaur stuff.
Yeah, and more like dinosaur crap, right? So now Run DMC come on, and then they blend their thing with Aerosmith, and it worked. And people going, oh, I don't know if I like this, but then yeah, it was kind of neat.
It was really neat.
It was kind of cool, and it's just like, okay, it's been there, it's done, you know. It's kind of like the Siberian Husky rock band or whatever they're called, Trans-Siberian
Orchestra.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, and I'll go a step further here when you talk about Run DMC and Aerosmith, and it's funny because that came out, I believe, in 85, 86, around
long before.
In the mid 80s.
Yeah.
Well, then fast forward 4 years, Public Enemy and Anthrax do Bring the Noise.
Yeah, Bring the Noise, yeah.
And it worked.
It sure did, and it was blending the two together. It was almost like two gangs of the same city coming together and say, hey, listen, why don't we sit down and play crib and smoke some Cuban cigars and have a cognac and have a good laugh.
Mm-hmm.
When they shouldn't be like that at all.
Yeah, but I mean, rap rock really was, it wasn't just like, it was nothing for a long time and then all of a sudden this one album comes out and it's become a thing. It's very much a natural progression where you said with Run DMC and Aerosmith, goes into Public Enemy with Anthrax, and of course, Rage Against the Machine.
I was going to say, Rage Against the Machine. Can anyone figure that out? Wow, that's wild. Anyway.
Yeah. And talking about an album that, again, you talk about timeless classic albums.
Oh,
that debut album.
Like, yeah. I mean, it's almost as classic as the first Van Halen, you know?
Yep.
And
it's such a groundbreaking album, too.
Oh, of course it is. Yeah, and the first Van Halen album was a groundbreaker. You know, when I was a kid, it was Hendrix, and then when I was a kid, it was Eddie Van Halen, but before that, it was Hendrix.
So that, as much as we can sit here and talk about the album itself and everything we need to talk about, we're actually going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go talking about Tool's Lateralus track by track. It's going to be a good one. Until then,
stick around. Yeah,
we'll be right back.
Perfect.
Hey everybody, Taylor here from the Gr8Wyte Experience. Just wanted to give you all a heads up that Mike McFarland, aka Mike the Bod from Bodcast, will be joining me for the next Gr8Wyte Experience episode, where he and I will be looking at our favorite Canadian pro wrestlers. Now, enough of me. Let's send it back to the episode. All right, we are back. So, Dad, it's time to start talking about Lateralus track by track. Now, before we do that, I'm going to give a couple of album notes here just to get us kicked off. So, Tool's Lateralus was released on May 15th, 2001. The album was recorded at Cello Studios in Hollywood, as well as Big Empty Space and The Lodge in North Hollywood between October of 2000 and January of 2001. The band consisted of Maynard James Keenan on vocals, Adam Jones on guitar, Justin Chancellor on bass, and Danny Carey on drums. The album was produced and mixed by David Botterill, who up until that point had worked on all the Tool records since Anima. He would later go on to record Good Apollo on Burning Star 4 Volume 1 by Coheed and Cambria, as well as the latest Mastodon album, Hushed and Grim, as well as the bands themselves helped mix with the album. So we're going to kick off with the first track on the album, The Grudge. One of the things, going back and listening to this thing, one thing I really didn't pick up on until I listened back to this, Maynard James Keenan, before he starts singing, he inhales. And that is such a cool thing, and that's such a weird, kind of cool touch that I think Maynard had, because Maynard could have just started singing. But they left that in the mix.
Yeah, and when you listen to it, it almost sounds like an effects pedal or something doing something. Got to listen to it very carefully. And I think when... I'm going to say the reason for doing that was for the fact that he can sing without breathing, and I think he goes for like a minute, literally without breathing. And if you hear him at the end, it's almost like there's nothing left.
Yeah, he lets out that big scream.
But he lets a big scream.
He does.
It's like, holy smokes.
Like, Maynard really, in my personal opinion, Maynard really is the star of this song, as his vocals go from really calm to intense, like you said at the...
Well, he sets the
at
tone.
End. He really does. And the one thing, and this is something you've even brought up when talking about Tool, is that while the rest of the band were already really good musicians, the one guy who improved over time was Maynard James Keenan.
He's the one that improved the most. And even listening to some of the Fear Inoculum, is that how you pronounce it?
Fear Inoculum.
Yeah, pardon me, which is the latest album. When you're listening to his vocals, listen to the syllables. They're not pronounced. They're blended out, right? So if you had syllables in a vocal, you would need pop filters and all these other things. And the reason why I'm talking about this is because it lends a real certain dynamic to the song that doesn't allow the vocalist to take over the song, but to steer it. And people are going, okay, that doesn't make any sense, or I don't understand what you're talking about. The whole thing is when it comes to producing and stuff, somebody behind the mix board will say, listen, Taylor, great vocal track. I need another one because we have a lot of syllables in there that we need to tame, and not by using a limiter or anything like that in the studio. I need you to do it through your vocals, because everyone knows the best capture is the first one, which is your best reference, which is microphone to a Marshall or to somebody's mouth. And if you get a good performance, you don't need a lot of EQing, you don't need a lot of changes. So when it comes to improving the vocals, Maynard, 2 high fives. That guy's vocals always improves, and he sings from the diaphragm like you're supposed to.
Yep.
But he knows how to lead the song through the dynamics.
He does, and especially when you go back and listen to the songs off Undertow, is that it sounds very forceful. His vocals are very forceful, whereas you see it on Anima, you can definitely tell that it's not as forceful. It's more, not laid back, but you can tell he's pulling back, but it's more of just natural. He's letting it naturally flow. He's not trying to force the vocal.
Yes, and he's playing his performance with a lot more, not enthusiasm, but you get more of the feeling, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Undertow sounded very angry.
Yep.
Sounded like he was ready to give somebody a right hook, even himself for that matter. But like I say, when it came to the latest album, you could see there was a huge change. And a lot of that has to do with, the producers of the record who are part of the performance, part of the production, right? So
yeah. But also that could be also contributed to, say, a vocal coach. Because a vocal coach could definitely show you how to sing without trying to be forceful, saying, okay, you want to try and hit this note, but you got to have it more coming out of your chest, where he's more
Yeah.
trying to push forward, right?
Yeah, and a vocal coach, like you say, is coaching, not criticizing. It's not a critique. It's not a criticism. It's they want them to say, "Listen, Maynard, you are a unique vocalist. Nobody sings like you. Nobody will ever be able to unless they impersonate you.
Mm-hmm.
You are unique. So if you don't like your singing, I'm sorry, but guess what? There's millions of people around the world that do. All right." So there are a lot of really good singers out there, and a lot of bad singers that still sell a lot of money.
Yep, but
Right.
I mean, but honestly, you can mess all that up with vocal pitching or whatever you want, right? So
Yes, yeah, and you can call it organic or whatever it is that doesn't use all that type of processing. There is short tail reverb processing on the vocals on some of the softer songs from the new album that I was listening to,
mm-hmm.
and that's what I was listening for is Maynard's vocals, because we know up to and including 10,000 Days where his vocals are sitting now in the mix.
Yeah, and we'll definitely talk about that later in this because that's something I really noticed,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about this later in the album. But one thing I do want to bring this up really quickly, and it's something that's a theme with the album, is that you really begin to notice how much Justin Chancellor's influence in the song really was. And The Grudge was really the first track off the album that you really begin to notice that, because it's very bass heavy. Him and Danny are the ones pushing it forward, where Adam is taking more of a backseat to them.
Yeah, Adam's just filling in a very good way. The thing about, like you say, about Justin is his bass playing and his bass work and his contribution to the band is much different, much more different than the original bass player. Paul Demore, yeah. And I think the way Justin Chandler plays is like Geddy Lee with Neil Peart. They're not competing against each other, but they're making each other be better.
Yeah.
And they're saying, okay, here's this, try that, you try this time signature, and it's not about trying to confuse the audience. It's about getting a performance that they're trying to put onto vinyl or onto a CD or a tape, mm-hmm. or whatever you want to call it, whatever they do. So I think Justin himself extracts the best out of the rest of the band, including Maynard, right? Because they all had to step up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And say, listen, what do you think of this? And because he brings to the table, I'm going to say that this Lateralus is predicated upon Justin.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it is.
It really is.
And even going back to what I was saying about Tool very much being like Rush. And Paul Demore very much, if you really think about it, he's kind of like what John Rutsey was to Rush.
Yeah. Yeah.
When John Rutsey left Rush and Neil Peart came in, that's when Rush was able to do what they do now. Tool was the same way when Justin Chancellor joined the band.
That's right. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of bands, even like AC/DC back in the beginning, and I'm not talking about Bon Scott, but I'm talking about the original bass player. And so just changing up one player in your band, like the Beatles with Ringo,
mm-hmm.
It's amazing how that just brings a whole new approach to how you're going to do things, Andy Summers from The Police. He wasn't their original guitarist.
Nope.
But he brought this whole new thing, and it's just like, wow, we like this. So I really, really, really tip my hat to Justin for his contribution in this Lateralus album. Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, we're going to talk about another guy, Danny Carey. And this is, again, another theme that we're going to talk about is just how much Danny really shines on this album. And one of the things that I always love about The Grudge, there's a drum fill he does at 3:44 in the song. It's right in between Wear the Grudge Like a Crown, Desperate for Control. And he does this double kick thing, fill, and it's really, really cool. And even Adam's playing on that. There's a riff off this song, Intolerance, off Undertow. That's what it kind of sounds like.
Yeah, yeah. There's always a taste of a Tool song in an album that's new that seems to be legacy. It's pulled forward. The Pot,
mm-hmm.
not the Pot, Right Into off 10,000 Days. There's a part in there where, to me, it sounds like something from Undertow. So now they've gone way back to the beginning.
Yep.
And the Rolling Stones were a band that went back to the beginning to say, listen, we've done all the disco stuff, we've done all this, we've done all that. Let's go back
to what made us successful.
Yeah, because right now we need something, and not to rehash some old stuff, but to feed the audience what they originally came to appreciate the band for.
Yep.
So,
but you can also present it in a new way too.
In a totally new way, and where and when it appears in the song is when you least expect it to happen. That's what's so unique about Tool. It's just like, wow, I didn't expect that. And Danny Carey's drumming on the latest album, I think you and I have probably beat this to death. It is some of his best work to this day. And Danny Carey's what, 64 years old? 63? Right?
How old is he?
Yeah, anyway.
He would be 61?
Yeah. Okay.
I think he's a 60.
Okay. So his drumming is extremely athletic.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be very good to drum like that night after night. Whether you're feeling good or not, or you've got the flu, or you're hungover or whatever, the audience doesn't care what kind of night you're having. They
paid the money.
Yeah.
You got to perform, right?
Yeah. So anyway, okay.
So the last thing I want to talk about, when talking about the Grudge, I want to talk about the breakdown in the song at the end of the song, because that still is my favorite part of the song, where Danny and Justin play the rhythm, then let it fade out as Adam and Maynard are fast faded in, with Maynard letting out that scream like we mentioned. That's a thing, and that's something, again, I will talk about this with a number of these songs here, is that's the one thing that Tool really does well, is they always finish strong.
Always. They set out to finish strong, and they don't always start strong, though.
It's true.
Right. Sometimes it could almost be a bit of a snore fest to one or two people going, oh, wow, really? I'm not digging this. But then you start listening to it, you're going, oh, okay, wait a minute. It's changing. Oh, this is getting interesting.
It's true. Because, I mean, you can think of so many songs you can think of where, the beginning and the middle parts are great, but if you have a terrible ending, it kind of ruins the song in general, because that's going to be your lasting impression. It's going to be like, sure, you're always going to think of that, right?
Well, Tool are a band, both in the studio and live, as you and I both can contest to, leave you wanting more.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, wow, what a performance. Wow, I've got to come back and see these guys again. And so you will listen to that last performance on the album and play it again, going, okay, so how did I get from the start to the finish again? And it's always a big finish, and it's there's no real hook in their song.
Nope.
They're not looking for an Eddie Van Halen guitar.
No, because it doesn't serve the songs, and that's what I really, especially looking at this album from a critical point, is that you definitely notice that a lot of their rhythms, a lot of their playing, a lot of what they're doing is not serving them, it's serving the song.
And that's what it should be about. Serve the music, serve the song. Like they say at a lot of studios, check your tuning, check your ego, serve the song.
Yep.
And that's what music is all about. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on to track 2, Eon Blue Apocalypse. Now, this is an instrumental track. Honestly, it doesn't serve much of a purpose outside of being a buffer between the Grudge and the Patients. So from there, we'll talk about the third track, The Patient.
Right.
Adam's picking of the notes, added with the synth sounds, and Danny's timed cymbal hits, and Maynard's real atmospheric vocals in the beginning of the track.
Wow.
It sets a tone.
Maynard's vocals on this, yeah, it's amazing. I think the articulation of the guitar work, like you say, son, is really, really, really good. The drumming and Danny Carey's drumming, even in a bad Tool song, he's still the best drummer that I can possibly say. Okay, not best drummer. Let's not say that.
Well, I would say
my favorite. Okay,
it's a favorite drummer for sure, because it's an objective list, right? When you talk about the best drummers of all time, because you can think about what about Neil Peart or Mike Portnoy or whoever, right?
Yeah, and even Gavin Harrison, who plays for Porcupine Tree, and now King Crimson also. Mm-hmm. That is extreme drumming. That is just extreme drumming. However, that doesn't make him the best. Most certainly does not make him the worst. Lars Ulrich is probably not the worst drummer we've ever heard.
No.
But but it's our favorite drummers, our favorite guitar players,
Yep.
not the best. So yeah, Daddy Carey does a really nice job. Maynard's vocals in The Patient, really really good.
It is. And this is definitely the first time that you really begin Maynard's vocals are mixed back while the band is mixed forward.
Yeah, no, that's funny you say that too, because they don't although they are very very good, they don't take that center stage presence in the mix itself.
They don't. And even Maynard live, like he's on the side of the stage in the dark, right?
Yeah, by his own accord, he wants to be back there for whatever reason.
Yeah, but I think it really helps the vocals in the song too, because again, if it was mixed high, then it's like right up in your face, right? But because of the song is kind of atmospheric, it's mixed back, it adds to it. It doesn't take away from it.
No, you're right, and it's a good blend of both vocals and the instruments, the musical instruments. So
yeah. Now we'll talk about Danny and Justin here, because I think Danny's usage of the drum rolls in this song are really spot on. He uses them very timely throughout the song. But for me, Justin Chancellor is one that I think he does a great job in this, because he just lays down a very solid platform for the rest of the guys, and it serves the song perfectly.
The rest of the band could actually make a mistake in this song, in a live performance, obviously. Not like Jimmy Page, who would actually leave a mistake on the album and say, "Hey, I'm Jimmy Page. I don't care." You know, anyone that's listened to a Whole Lot of Love realizes I think there's 2 or 3 mistakes in that song. But hey, he's rock and roll royalty, so he can do what he wants. Tool doesn't use that approach because
they're not Led Zeppelin.
They're not Led Zeppelin. However, if they were to make a mistake in a live performance, I would have to guess the majority of the people, including ourselves, may miss it. Because
it would be very subtle.
Because it would be very subtle and easy to bounce back from, right? So, can't say nearly enough about how Justin has laid a really good foundation, like you say, for the bottom end of the song, which is the glue to this whole album, I would think.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a song that, when we've seen them live, it's something that doesn't get played.
No, that's funny.
The Patient. Because I was thinking about this when we were doing this. It's like, there's a lot of stuff off Undertow they don't play.
No, you're right.
Anima, very hit and miss what they really play off that. Lateralis, I mean, the big tracks off Lateralis, like, I think The Grudge, I think they only played once. But they play Schism, they play Parabola, they play Lateralis, they play the big tracks. They don't go for the deeper cuts.
No.
But keep in mind, it's been 14 years since we last saw them live, right?
Yeah.
So I think nowadays, from what I was reading, I think they're starting to incorporate more of their older deep cuts, whether it be Intolerance, Hooker with a Penis, stuff like that from the other albums. So, but it is good. So we're going to move along here. Now, of course, the 4th track is another filler. We're not going to talk too much about it, called Mantra. Track 5. Schism.
Huge.
This is where you really begin to see where Justin Chancellor shines, and it's such a recognizable opening bass line, and it's only aided by the fact that Adam Jones's guitar fades in, and that's really a Tool trademark, and it's something that, funny, I actually didn't really bring this up. Where did I not bring it up here? I think I didn't bring it up in The Patient, because he does that when Adam's guitar fades in. Or the feedback fades in to the chorus.
Right. Actually, when you go way back to Undertow, Sober itself is really not a heavy song. Adam cuts way back on the volume, which takes all the crunch out of, and it's very light.
A lot of treble. A
lot of treble. But going on to the song that we're discussing right now, it's called Riding the Volume Pot. There's a lot of good, really old players like Joe Perry from Aerosmith. Joe Bonamassa, of course. All the old guitar players, instead of unplugging a guitar, they'll turn the volume pot right off so they can talk to whoever it is they're talking to in an interview or something. But they use that as a tonal component to the music. And by blending and fading, and they know how much to come on to that volume pot at a certain part of the song.
Yep.
And that has been a huge trademark of Adam Jones for almost since the beginning.
It has. And even you're talking about like with the chamber pots, like they would turn it all the way down. Tom Morello for Rage Against the Machine was very well known to do this because when you listen back to Bulls on Parade, some of the scratching noises he did, basically what he did was he had a toggle swatch like your Les Paul over here. He turned I think the bass one he had all the way to 0, treble was all the way to 10, and he would just flick back and forth while
on and off,
rubbing the strings. That's all he was doing with a wah-wah pedal.
And it's funny you mentioned Tom Morello because he's good friends with Adam Jones.
He is.
Yes. Adam Jones is actually really, really good friends with Kirk Hammett from Metallica.
Yeah, because you remember when we saw them in 2006, I think it was like 3 days prior, they were in Honolulu.
Surfing. And
Kirk Hammett was playing with them.
Yeah. They love surfing, those two cats.
They do.
They are beach bums. They look like beach bums.
Well, beach Adam bums. Just looks like a hairless, Wookiee, so...
Yeah. Anyway, so getting back to the schism, once again, Justin is getting 2 snaps because he's the man on that.
No, he's fantastic. And I mean, Adam Jones, again, he takes such a backseat to Justin in the song, which is kind of rare in rock music when you really think about it, because a lot of guitar players, in a lot of rock music, guitar players never take a backseat to bass players.
No, they're the rhythm section, right? Especially if you don't have a keyboardist like Deep Purple or Uriah Heep or some of these bands where John Lord for Deep Purple was, and still, well, he's dead now, but he
was definitely the main opponent. I think the guy from Guitar World, I'm blanking on his name there, the editor-in-chief for the longest time, he said that Deep Purple without the organ would just be another knockoff Zeppelin.
That's all they would be. Yeah. I mean, anyone that has ever heard or owned or whatever Made in Japan, John Lord pretty much is the man.
Yeah, but even on the studio records, like where you be Fireball, Machine Head.
Yeah, especially on Machine Head, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I'm not just talking about Lazy, the song Lazy.
Nope. Yeah. Space Truckin'. Highway Star.
And he said, everybody was using Marshalls, so that's what he did. He plugged into a Marshall. He used a Marshall Plexi, and he plugged a Hammond P3 into a 100-watt Marshall Plexi, a 62 Marshall Plexi. And they spent more money fixing that and keeping it alive because it's older than dirt, and that was his tone. So.
And it's funny because now with stuff like Pro Tools and all these programs, you can do it with a plugin.
You can, and you can tweak it, and you never have to worry about the preamplifier and the Marshall blowing up and then going, uh-oh.
For sure. Now, the other couple of notes I have on this song, right around 4 minutes, 38 seconds, what I really appreciate from Maynard, and we talk about this on The Patient, his vocal delivery on this has this real emotion behind it. And that's something that I really, really enjoy about Maynard, especially whether he was singing with, not even with Tool, but like A Perfect Circle, or some of the stuff he's doing with Pussifer, where you definitely see Maynard is not just trying to force it, he's being very emotional with it.
Yeah, same with helping his friend Tori
Amos,
yeah. He is a emotional singer, and it comes through. It resonates in their music, right? So people might say, okay, like I know you and I've had this discussion before about lead vocalists with a guitar around their neck on stage. I've seen Maynard with one. I've seen
Chris Cornell.
I think he does actually play a little bit. Bono from U2. Eddie Vedder. So I'm shaking my head at these guys. And there was another guy, too, that had one. Anyway, it's slipping my head. I just going, okay, put the guitar away. Go back to singing. You have a guitar player. Yep. Okay? So stick to what you know. Don't try to... it was Gord Downing, and I didn't want to say anything negative about Gord Downing, God rest his soul. But,
Yeah, but I think the difference is, for me, is that if it doesn't serve the songs...
Of course, once again, it goes back to
and
that.
I think it's weird because, again, when you look back at with Cornell, with Soundgarden, where it was like... He already had Kim Thianel. He didn't really need a second guitar player.
No. And I know I sound like a snob when I say this. I'm not a great guitar player myself.
No.
But when these guys are holding the guitar, they look like they're not guitar players. Because they don't even know how to hold one.
Well, Bono is a perfect example.
He's a prime example. He's a prime example. It's just like, you look stupid with a guitar on there, right?
Yep.
It's like watching James Hetfield drum. You're not good. You're a little bit better than Lars, but you're shitty, okay? Are you allowed to swear on YouTube? Sorry.
Too
Sorry,
late now,
man.
Dad. Don't worry.
Can you edit that sound?
Fuck it. I'll keep it in.
Oh, yes!
Fuck it. Yes! That's it. That's your answer. That's your answer for everything. So,
That's our...
now, of course, talking about really strong endings. The Schism has it because I think the final minute really ends strong. I don't know if you noticed this when you were listening back. Did you happen to notice? No, sorry, that's another track I'm thinking of. It's
I know what you were. Yeah, I knew where you were going with that. So
yeah, but no, it's another staple, a trademark of the songs. Not a ton I could really say more on it. I think we should just move on to tracks 6 and 7. Now, of course, I know on your notes you only have Parabola on here. I'm going to include Parabola on here just because, again, the two songs really are together.
And there's two parts to it, too.
There's two parts to it. So I'll quickly just give my thoughts on Parabola, then we'll go into Parabola. Okay. So it takes you really on a trip for about 3 minutes, 4 seconds. Maynard, again, has this really haunting vocal delivery with the band, while the band really delivers that haunting, dreamlike, atmospheric playing. I absolutely love the way that Adam, again, his feedback fading in when Parabola ends and Parabola begins.
It's a segue into...
It's a segue. Yeah. And it's funny because when you... It's something that I think if you had the album and you listen to those two back to back, it doesn't work. Parabola, I don't think the final part doesn't work if you listen to it individually.
No, it most certainly doesn't. In fact, if it didn't appear, that would suit me just as well. Because this is something all onto its own that is an animal that really draws you in. It's just like, wow.
And it's funny because, again, so far on this album, like Tool really has been very cerebral. They have this very cerebral feel to them, but they're not very forceful. They're more laid back, more atmospheric.
But not by accident.
Parabola, this is where they finally say, okay, let's do this. Let's kick it off. And honestly, this song really features some of my favorite riffs Adam Jones ever wrote. And of course, I got to mention, because Adam and the rest of the band, for anybody who plays guitar or any kind of instrument, there's certain tunings with guitars. Yes. There's the standard tuning, there's all kind of drop tuning. So Danny and Justin do drop D. For this track, Danny drops the low D to B. And that's what really gives it that sort of super...
2 steps down.
2 steps, but it's just that strength.
Wow.
And it gives it, and I think he did it on Prison Sex. I think he did it on the first album, or Undertow. And this is, again, that's what really is defining with the song, is just that guitar sound, because it doesn't sound like Adam throughout the rest of the album, right?
Yeah.
But I think it really works. And again, Justin and Danny are no slouches in this song either.
No, absolutely. Parabola itself, I don't believe I would enjoy it live, because I don't think it would resonate the same as it does in the studio album, where you don't have any other peripheral distraction. Like, I'm talking about audience or something like that. It's just, there's another song that we're going to talk about on this album here. And, I've got a thing I want to talk about, which is very interesting, like Parabola, where,
it wouldn't work. It wouldn't capture you live.
Yeah, that's
I think the song would work live, because they've played it live and it works.
Yes.
But, again, it doesn't... For yourself, it wouldn't work because of there's other distractions going on.
Yeah, and that's right. But once again, I'm not the only one at the venue. So
Absolutely. And of course, Justin and Danny, they really bring it in the song. And Danny really proves why he's one of the all-time greats, while Justin just kills it with his bass work that fits perfectly. And Maynard James Keenan, once again, his vocals, and it's weird because Maynard's vocals are so oddly perfect for this song, because like the rest of the track, he has this kind of laid back, melodic approach versus what the rest of the band is doing, where they're chuffly rocking, trying to very hard driving.
Yeah.
And here's Maynard, again, he's back in the mix, and it weirdly fits.
But Maynard's vocals, like you were saying, they don't pitch high and low. They kind of go just straight along.
Yep.
It's just like.
But do you think that's a conscious decision that he's doing?
Most certainly, yes. Like I just alluded to earlier, it's not by accident that came out that way. They knew what they wanted the end result to be, and I think they achieved that really well.
So I want to talk about Justin again, because there's a bass part he played at 3 minutes 58 seconds, and I believe if memory serves me correctly, I think the song really starts to dip, and Justin has this. He has this bass part. It sounds like it would have came off Eulogy, off Anima.
Yeah, yeah. You're absolutely right. Such as another song we're going to talk about that has another feel of another album. So, yeah.
Now, the note I was trying to mention earlier, and I completely forgot about, Adam Jones's final couple of notes at the end of the song. Now, of course, you're familiar with the band, yes.
Of course.
There's a song called Roundabout.
He's huge.
The very beginning of Roundabout. Am I the only one who thinks the final couple of notes of the song is ding, ding, ding? Sounds like very reminiscent of Roundabout.
Yes, of course. Yeah. You know, I've heard people finish up songs that sound a little bit like the beginning of In a Gutta de Vida.
Yep.
I don't mean the keyboard, I'm talking about the guitar work.
Am I wrong for thinking, I just think In the Garden de Vida is kind of overrated a little bit?
Oh, it's 100% overrated. But it served its purpose for those that were very, very high on whatever they were high on.
Yeah.
Hence the reason why it was In the Garden of Eden, not In a Gutta de Vida.
Yeah. Well,
So-
I mean, he was high. I think the keyboards, I think he was high on acid or something.
Yeah,
recording
yeah.
it. Well, Christ, the song was like, what, 12 minutes long?
Yeah, yeah. The drumming, I don't think the drum solo was all that great. But whatever.
Yeah.
Boo-hoo. Yeah. So on to our next one, son?
Track 8,
Track 8.
Ticks and Leeches.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say...
Go for it.
Probably my least favorite track on this album.
I think you and I are in the same boat.
And we both also agree that this sounds like something that could have came off OP8, which is my least favorite album of Tool.
Yeah. But
Least
it's just an EP, though. That's the only thing, right?
Yes, of course. But once again, it has that feel of... It could have easily been slid into that EP if they had a couple of... which I think they did have a couple of studio... plus a hybrid of mixed live and
Yeah, they
studio.
did. Yeah, because I think Jerk Off, Part of Me, I think those were live tracks.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think we have to go too far with Ticks and Leeches.
Ticks and Leeches.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I do have a couple of notes here I wanted
Yes,
to
you
mention.
do,
So,
yeah.
of course, Danny Carey.
Mm-hmm.
That dude, right out of the opening. You want to talk about a drummer who takes full control with the opening beats.
Oh, yeah.
And those fills he's throwing in there. And obviously, again, Justin gives a great performance in the track. It's such a great compliment. And I do agree with you, because I think my main issue with the song really comes at 3 minutes, 26 seconds, where the song just comes to a full stop.
It does.
And the momentum drops.
Yeah.
And it never recovers.
No, it and that's the thing. It doesn't recover. It's not like, okay, where do we go from here? Well, nowhere is where they went. But whatever. Once again, I'm not going to discount the fact that Danny Carey's drumming is, and just Justin's bass work.
The rhythm section is just so fantastic. Is what we're trying to get at.
Of course, it is totally. So, I will lead you to our next
I will now.
point.
One more note I want to make.
Oh, sorry.
Has nothing to do with the song, but I did read somewhere that there's an actor named Jason Momoa, and he's a big dude. He's like 6'3" or 6'4", whatever he is. So he was known to play Aquaman.
Oh.
There was an Aquaman movie that came out a few years ago, and he was the main character in the movie. He came out and said, somebody asked him, "Oh, what were some of the songs that you were listening to when you were training to bulk up for the role?" And he included Ticks and Leeches.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's no shock or surprise that even a lot of people will have New World Order or Just One Fix or something.
Oh, the live version just one fix off Audio's Puejo or whatever it was called.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, obviously it's not a Tool album, but I'm just talking about playlists for working out, right? So
100%.
Yeah.
Now, number 9, the title track, Lateralus.
Mhm.
You and I are going to agree on this.
100%.
Without question, single-handedly, the best song on the album.
My favorite Tool song by far. And once again, this is the song, in my opinion, that seems like the Beatles would have written, because it is comprised of several songs, but blends in nicely, has a good intro, good outro, goes into another song, but still is leaving you thinking about what you just heard, and the final drumming. That is just the grand finale of that song is not like a Tool song where it just goes higher, higher, and faster and faster. And
No,
louder
it
and
keeps
louder.
the same sort of just tempo the entire way.
It just rides right out.
But it's so good, right?
It totally is.
And it's a song that I think, and this is a big criticism I had of Fear and Column, was that Fear and Column is an album, going back to Rush, you and I were talking about this before we hit record, and you said about how Tool and Rush were very much compatible. Fear and Column really is kind of like Tool's version of Hemispheres.
Yes.
It's an album where I think the diehard fans will get a lot out of it, but I don't think it would pick up a lot of new fans because
no, most certainly not.
The album itself, I think it suffers from three big things. The songs are too long. The songs themselves, while good, they don't really hold your attention for
and that's
the entire way. And that's where I think
the problem.
Lateralus as a song and as an album really succeeds because
Yeah.
the songs are, Lateralus I think is one of the longer tracks, like 9 minutes long, but it's a song that never drops. It never loses momentum. It keeps building and building and building and building. It keeps going.
And you don't lose interest or focus on it when you're listening to it. It's one of those songs that sometimes when you play again, it's like watching a movie and you missed something in that movie. You go, oh, wow, that was really cool, or whatever. So, yeah, Lateralus. My favorite Tool song, bar none.
I would say easy top 3 for me.
Top 3.
I would say top 3, if not number 1. I would agree with that. The one big thing about this song, a lot of people over the years have mentioned about the Fibonacci sequence.
Yes.
For myself, I don't think much about it when I hear the track.
I didn't put any thought into it at all.
No, and it is a very interesting thing to think about when you really think about that. You hear the song, but the funny thing is that I was watching this thing. Maynard was on Joe Rogan.
Oh yeah.
On the Joe Rogan Experience, and Rogan asked him about that, and he goes, "Yeah, it was not planned.
Right.
Basically, it was just Justin brought in the riff. It was like a temp. I think it was like either a bar of 9 to a bar of 8 to a bar of 7, and it just kept getting shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter. And Maynard just brought in vocals that fit.
Sure, which he is a master of.
He is.
He really truly is when it comes to that, because Maynard's approach, I'm sure, to putting lyrical content and vocals onto a track is, where is it going to finish before it starts?
Yeah.
Because he's not going to drive a car that has no brakes.
No.
Right? You've got to figure out, okay, I'm going downhill here. I'm going to have to stop this school bus. When he's singing, he knows how it's going to end up. So the time signatures or the signatures that Tool over the years have chosen to use are complex, but they're not trying to be complex. They're not trying to be a prog
No,
band.
they don't go out of their way
Right.
to do that.
No.
It's more of an organic, natural thing that just happens when they write the songs.
It is. That's the way they've always written their songs.
Mm-hmm.
So nobody's ever going to say, they're going to take their girl out dancing to Tool.
No.
Because that's not going to happen.
No, absolutely not. And one thing I never actually mentioned here at any point in this episode, I was reading somewhere years ago. Maynard was talking about writing for Lateralus, the album.
Oh.
He said this was easily the hardest Tool album to write.
Wow.
For 2 reasons. Number one, the complexity of the compositions of the songs,
Right.
but also because of that, Maynard said writing the lyrics was kind of like walking down a staircase in the dark, blindfolded with one leg. You didn't know exactly where you're taking a blind leap of faith of where it's going to land, and is it going to fit?
Right, and it's what are we looking at? A lucky land?
Pretty much.
Yeah, because there was still a bit of a gap between that album and the previous one.
Yep.
And still probably some animosity or some things with the old Zoo record crew.
It's true, but it's like the old saying, right? It's the sicker the person is, the better the art. This was very much that, right? Because of the personal, head butting and everything going on behind the scenes. It really they brought that intensity and they brought that tension into the songs.
Yeah, they did.
And it suited the songs perfect.
And they brought the emotion too. Yeah.
It did. Now, of course, we're going to talk about the opening because I really love how the song builds for about 1:12. Builds and builds and builds. Danny and Justin's mix become louder and louder, and then it explodes into the main riff.
Yeah, and like a lot of Tool entries, or song entries rather, They don't do this. They are sometimes a little bit slow getting in there, but you're listening to the drum, right? Okay, you hear it coming in. It's just coming in like that. I don't think anyone would heard that.
Just like
yeah,
and it keeps building, right?
yes, and so you know that something is going to happen. It's like watching a movie, and then the killer comes out of the closet with a knife and a ski mask.
Yep.
You know it's going to happen and so that's cool. So you don't have to worry about this song going, oh man, this is going to be another snore fest.
No, but this is definitely a song that even in whether it's in the studio or live, it's fantastic. But the one thing I think that really is cool about it, you would not have really noticed this unless you saw them live. Danny Carey's gong hit.
Yeah, because you don't see it, like you say, in the studio, son. And Danny actually tucks one of his sticks under his arm, and he's playing with one hand, and then he reaches around and hits the gong with the mallet, and then grabs the stick again. So just the timing of coming around.
Yeah.
I mean, because if he missed the hit and staggered, that song would have ended horribly live.
Yeah, it would have. But I think it really helps because of how Danny's drums are set up, where you have the hi-hat directly in front of him. Where instead of crossing over, he's going right arm straight, left arm kind of stuck back, so he could do. He's just like that.
Yeah, and Danny's talked about having his old drums, mic'd up, right? The microphones do get in the way. And if you hit one in a session, that's not going to sound good.
No, because all you hear is...
Yeah, you're going to... So, unless you're using Pro Tools, it's going to be very hard to...
Which, I think they had Pro Tools in 2001, but I mean, Tool really hasn't been that kind of band.
No.
They've definitely used... Like, I'm sure they record off Pro Tools, but they don't really go back and edit it too much about it.
Yeah,
definitely with all of the synth sounds and everything, they probably do it for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, even on a live performance... where Adam Jones uses the synth pedals.
Yep.
And all their live performance is done live.
Yep.
They don't do any re-recorded or pre-recorded stuff and then just let it roll out.
No, because their music, one doesn't allow for it because it's from the guys themselves.
Yeah. And just like every other band, Tool themselves have probably put on some less than perfect shows too.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, nobody's perfect, right?
No, not even perfect circle.
No, of course. Now, the last note I want to make here, and this is something that over the years you've actually come to notice. Danny has this rolling hi-hat part at about 4 minutes, 56 seconds, and you've always maintained that he's out of time or something, or he's out of sync with the rest of the band, and he comes all the way back?
3 times it goes out of sync, and then it comes around again. 3 times. It's just like, oh, that didn't sound right. And then he's... like this, and it's just like, okay. And it's right at the very, very beginning of it where it's out, and then it comes around. And the 3rd time, it almost sounds like it's off. It's very, very weird.
Yeah.
So...
But it could be a weird thing where it either could have been a deliberate thing by Danny.
I think it is.
Yeah, because honestly, Danny's one of those prolific drummers where if he makes a mistake, he makes a mistake. But Danny, if he does that... He's thought about, okay, this would sound cool and kind of off the beat track, right?
Yeah, how can I still use that? He's not going to waste things, right? So with the band themselves, like the drummer is keeping the time. So if the drummer goes off and comes back, then the band just keeps playing along, right? So when it comes to Danny's drumming like that on the hi-hat, because of it being a hi-hat, if it was something else, you probably wouldn't notice it, right? But because he's not... hitting the snare or hitting 2 kicks, going snare and then 2 kicks, then playing.
I think if it was like a kick drum, I think it would be more noticeable, but...
Yes, of course. Yeah, of course. But I think people really have to go back and listen to that, and they would know what I'm talking about. Or maybe they'll say, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about.
Hey, it's good enough for my podcast, man.
There you go.
So we're going to move on to the 10th track of the album, Disposition.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to let you take the reins on this one, because I know you've got some good thoughts on this one.
Yeah.
I don't have much to really say on this one. I think it's not a bad track at all. I think it's a track that works on its own. It's definitely an album track. It's not a track that, if you play it on its own, works
Yeah.
to a certain extent. It's more a build-up to what Reflection is.
It is. That's exactly what I was going to say. It's almost like a precursor to Reflection. It's not a filler tune.
It's not, and I'm not trying to allude that it is.
Yeah.
It's an album track.
It is an album track, and it is once again, it is a Justin Chandler thing. It is the bass work is so good, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, someone once said that frustrated lead guitar players learn how to play the bass, which means they're like Justin Chandler or Chancellor, pardon me, or Billy. God, you know,
Billy Corgan?
Not Billy Corgan, no. He plays with Winery Dogs in them. Anyway.
I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, so I played in Mr. Big.
Oh!
Yeah, God. Yeah, Billy Sheenan.
Billy Sheenan.
Billy Sheenan, sorry, you guys. Bit of a senior moment.
Isn't
there.
it hilarious, that Mr. Big had all that talent, and yet they weren't
Richie
really...
Kotzen? Yeah.
Well, they had Richie Kotzen, but they had Paul Gilbert.
They
had some of the best musicians in the world, and yet they put out a ballad?
Yeah, I know. I mean, even the drumming in that was like ass.
Yeah, even if it's like Them Damn Yankees.
Exactly.
You listen to it and you're like, what the hell? You have Ted Nugent, you have these really hard rocking guys, and you're like, what is this?
It was Amboy Dukes.
No, even if even more recently with say a Velvet Revolver, at least that was more of a rock album.
Yeah, and once again, because of the fact that they've got the STP singer, right?
Scott Weiland.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Which at first seems like such a weird choice, given that the guys in Guns N' Roses would pick Scott. But I guess in retrospect, when you look back on it and you listen to the old STP records, okay, yeah, you can believe it.
Yeah. It's not the DeLeo brothers, though.
No.
I love those guys.
I know you do, Pat.
Yeah, I do.
But going back to the song here, one of the things I really appreciate about this, and it's something that I thought was really cool growing up, and it still hits for me today, Danny Carey's tabla. The tabla playing on it is such a weird, kind of cool, and I think that's what really caught my ear about the Tea Party years ago.
Yes.
Was on
Sister
Awake, but also Temptation.
Yeah.
There was a live version of Temptation with that Much Music when they had a tabla player coming in and playing it.
And maybe Army Ants. No, not Army Ants, sorry. Yeah, they had the tabla ensemble. The Toronto tabla ensemble, come on. Yeah, love it. Yeah, I mean, especially when Danny was experimenting with the Roland Hansonic 15, which had tabla and other orchestral textures on that particular device. And he still uses old battery, the old drum trigger battery. That's as old as Christ himself.
Yeah,
right?
but his reasoning, though, is actually really very smart when you really think of it, because he says the electronic ones sound electronic.
They do, yes.
And that's why he doesn't use them.
Yes, and that's...
They sound fake, they sound possessed.
Yeah, they do. They sound...
processed, I should say.
Way over-processed. But yeah, the battery, especially the first version of battery, So Disposition, once again, that is a song that's Danny Carey and most certainly Justin Chancellor, right? So
absolutely. Mm-hmm. So we're going to go on to track 11, Reflection.
Yeah. Okay.
This is a song that you want to talk about a song that is prog through and through.
Yes.
Because when you talk about it, two things really come to mind. The atmospheric synths and the cricket noises.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just like, okay. And, there's an old song by Paul McCartney called Uncle Albert. It's a Paul McCartney and Wings song. And they use crickets in this song, too. It's just like, okay, like who would ever think to use that? Well, Paul McCartney would, right? Who would think to use that? Adam Jones would, because he thinks so far out of the box. He comes up with things that just blow my mind. I just go, wow.
Yeah.
That is truly, when it comes to Tool, the contributions in the song and where they came from.
It's true.
You just know.
But even Adam's solo on it, it sounds like the solo on Jambai.
Isn't that?
With the tube, for the voice tube that he was using.
Yeah, And, he most certainly was not trying to be like Peter Frampton and come alive on the live.
No, and it's funny because I have it in my notes here because I really enjoyed the sequence at 7:35 to 8:34 where Adam starts playing this David Gilbert, Robert Fripp sort of guitar solo, and that's the one thing I really come to really think about Adam Jones is that as great of a rhythm guy is, his solos are pretty underrated.
Oh, they're very
because they're
underrated.
not serving him; they're serving the song.
Of course, and they don't necessarily follow any chord progression.
Nope.
They do follow the root note or come back to the root note because you have to, because it would just sound like ass if you didn't. But my take on this song, Son, which is really funny, is the very, very end. It is so eerie.
Yep.
And it's Adam Jones. And it's so eerie. It's just like, and it gets quieter and quieter and it just plays out. And it's like, oh, that is weird. That is eerie. And there's another song by The Cult, and that's Firewoman. On the studio, when you hear Billy Duffy's guitar pick and at the very, very end of it, it repeats itself and it just fades out. And it's just eerie. So I don't know why I would bring The Cult into that.
No, it's just something that really comes to mind. And
yeah.
Again, I mean, this is one of those songs that finishes strong off the album. And again, that's another Tool trait for sure. But it's one of those tracks that, again, kind of like Disposition, it's an album track.
Yeah, in the arrangement.
In the arrangement, it is. It can work on its own.
Yes.
But it's definitely an album track.
It is, and it serves the album very well, and you can tell that it's not something that they had written back in Opiate and said, hey, why don't we just throw this on there, right?
Yeah.
You know, it's not like David Bowie coming up with Rebel Rebel and then putting in Modern Love on the same album. They'd go, what the heck happened there?
Yeah.
You know, Mick Ronson was long dead by then anyway, so I think he was anyway.
That is true.
So, yeah.
So track 12, Triad.
Triad. What a tribal sounding song this is.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like some kind of war, spiritual war thing that has taken, the Maori All Blacks rugby team before they're playing England.
Yeah, it definitely has I think it's a track that would have fit perfectly on Anima. Because it has that feel of that really distorted guitars. It kind of sounds like one of the, I don't want to say filler, but kind of like the instrumental tracks that they were doing off of it. It's kind of like if they made that into a full actual song.
Yeah, I think the song itself would have been a little bit ahead of its time for Anima in terms of the production. But, you know, because myself personally, I still find Anima a little bit raw.
I could see that. And I think the production... Yeah. It sounds a bit dated today. If you go
does.
back and listen to the album from strictly a mixing and production point, but I keep in mind, it's the product of its time, because a lot of the rock bands coming out at the time were like that. But I think for me with Triad, and it's funny you mentioned it has this real tribal thing, because I feel like it has this very industrial rock thing, kind of like if Nine Inch Nails were trying to write a Tool song.
Yeah, and this could have easily been an opening track before Ministry came on stage.
Yeah.
Before, doing Let's Go or one of those really over-the-top Ministry tunes.
Yeah, it could have fit, again, going back to Nine Inch Nails, it could have fit off something like The Fragile, where The Fragile was definitely more very distorted, atmospheric, but even the more rock songs like Starfuckers or... some of the more heavier rock tracks Trent Reznor was doing at the time, I think it could have fit.
Yeah, even if Short Bus or somebody like that was involved in this, I think they could have taken something out of that and worked it into their album.
Absolutely. So the final track, again, it's a noise track, Feab de Oit. And honestly, it's just a noise track. It's nothing really to say about it. The only thing I could really say, and I was going back to watch Crash Thompson, I mentioned him earlier in this episode, he did a whole episode on how to get into Tool.
Right.
He made a mention about this song, and if you listen to it closely, there's like this distorted, it sounds like a voicemail, and it's about aliens.
Yeah, wow. You know, and this kind of reminds me a little bit of Undertow when you hear the heartbeat, boom, 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 and then Bill Hicks comes on, the comedian
Yeah.
Bill Hicks. Well, who would have
I
expected him
think
to come on?
I think drugs have done some good for people. I really do. And
Yeah, yeah, and I'm sitting. Hey, wait a minute, is that Bill Hicks?
Mhm.
Because I had the cassette. I didn't have the CD to see the the Bill Hicks kind of hat tip or tribute or whatever to.
Right, and of course, well, when Tool did Lollapalooza in the early '90s, they brought Bill Hicks out
Oh, that's
on the
right.
road with them, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's right. I
But
forgot about
it's kind of uncommon to see rock bands bring out a comedian. More recently, Queens of the Stone Age did it with Bill Burr.
that. Bill Burr. Yeah.
Yeah, they brought Bill Burr out with Queens of the Stone Age, and
Mhm.
Bill's talked about that. So we've come to the end of Lateralus here, Dad. Now,
Yeah.
one more thing I do want to talk about, and something that, going back to the Tool timeline that we didn't actually talk about. In 2000, Tool released the box set Salival.
Yes.
Now, I want to get your quick thoughts on Salival because honestly, it's such a bullshit box set.
It is, and you know, but at that time it was the only. It was the only place you could get no quarter.
And that's what really is the main thing off that album because, again,
Yeah.
my whole thing with rock bands covering Led Zeppelin is that they rarely do it well. They have their own spin on the songs, but they're just kind of, okay, it's like the Beatles. There's never been a good Beatles cover.
No, you're absolutely right. And Jimmy Page says he totally embraces other people's version of their music. But when I saw Heart, the old Seattle band Heart,
Yep.
they played Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin. And that was still the best cover version of any song I've ever heard in my entire life. Ever. And they played it with passion. They played it with everything they had. And it was a tribute to John Bonham. That's exactly what it was. And that's why they were the first ones selected for the Kennedy Center Performing Arts for Led Zeppelin. They were the first ones selected, even over Lenny Kravitz and them.
Yeah.
And, Craig Ross's guitar work on Whole Lotta Love and that tribute to Led Zeppelin was just incredible.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Craig Ross fan. And Craig Ross says, you know what, man, you're standing in front of Jimmy Page.
Mm-hmm.
If you blow that, you know.
But even talking about Rock and Roll, the song, and I know the Foo Fighters covered it on one of their live DVDs when they played at Wembley.
Yeah.
And it's cool because they had Jimmy Page and John Paul Jones come join them.
Of course.
And Dave Grohl's behind the kit, and Taylor Hawkins is the one singing.
Yeah, and Taylor Hawkins, in my personal opinion, is a much better singer than Dave Grohl. I know, no, but then again, I'm a bigger fan of Keith Richards singing than Mick Jagger's.
Okay.
Oddly enough, when it comes to the Rolling Stones, I'm all about the Brian Jones era. You know?
Yeah, the 60s era.
Yeah. The Painted Black, Jumpin' Jack Flash, that was written by, Bill Wyman.
Yeah. It's kind of like the AC/DC fans where you just have you definitely have
Bon
the people,
Scott.
Bon Scott people, and you have the Brian Johnson people.
Yeah, and there's a divide there.
Yeah, but now is there going to be another divide with the Axl Rose people?
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
All right. Well, guys, I guess that wraps up this album. So we're going to take another quick break here on the Great White Experience, and we will come back for the close. Coming right back. All right, we are back. Huge thank you once again to my dad for once again jumping on to do this episode with me today. I know he had as much fun doing the episode as I did recording it with him. So that wraps up this episode of the Great White Experience. You can find the show on Twitter at Gr8WytePod, as well as myself at Gr8WyteGipster. And coming in 2022, you will be able to listen to the show here on YouTube, as well as SoundCloud, iTunes, and Spotify. For this episode, I am your host, Taylor Gibson, and I'll see you next time.